After observing Mr. Moreau teach a math and science class of 4th grade, I did see him start with a warm-up. In that warm-up, the children worked some division problems together. He did use stations. They went to 5 separate stations, which were multiplication fact practice. There was a computer station, a game station where they were playing 4 in a row. There was a small group table with Mr. Moreau, and there was also a station where they were working in math interactive journals. And in those journals, they were skip counting. I observed exactly what he told me they were going to do. I did see differentiation with his small groups. He used bigger numbers with some groups than others. And the children were working in Think Through Math on the computer program, which the program differentiates for each child, giving them a separate pathway. Student engagement. It was quite an honor to watch Mr. Moreau and the engagement of his students. We here at Heather Glen, 23 of us, just returned back from a trip to Ron Clark, and I believe that it especially inspired Mr. Moreau. I saw many of the strategies that we saw at Ron Clark Academy used by Mr. Moreau. He had a special hand clap, and they ended with their hands on the table, and they were frozen for 5 seconds. And during that time, he was able to really have their attention and give instruction. He had the students always stand up when they talked, and they used complete sentences to answer all questions. Another strategy that we learned from Ron Clark was about teaching with our hands above our waist. Mr. Moreau did this, and so did his students. They seemed excited as they were talking and sharing, and they really liked this strategy, and it kept them focused. He also had the students teach to each other. They learned to stand up and address each other politely. They could even say, "I disagree with you," and then share why. They were very encouraging, but the class was more engaged than when I have observed before in his class, and they were very excited about this lesson. The things that went well were definitely the engagement. The students were 100% engaged and very excited about the way Mr. Moreau was teaching, which is new strategies for him. We had only returned from Ron Clark on Monday, and the observation was on Tuesday. So they had only practiced this and learned his new strategies for 1 day. So it was very exciting to see how much they had embraced it, and they liked the new teacher that he had become. Some things that I think that Mr. Moreau needs to work on, which we have sat down and discussed these things, were the rigor of his problems. They were just, I call them naked problems. It was just simply operations. He really needs to bring in real-world situations and make them all relate to problem-solving situations. We know here in Texas when we take our STAR test that it's all problem-solving and even based on multiple-step problems. So simply knowing how to multiply and divide is not going to help them to solve the problems if they don't know when they need to multiply and when they need to divide. So that's something Mr. Moreau and I have discussed, and we are both looking for ways to help him incorporate that every day into his lessons. The warm-up that he did at the beginning of class was not something that I was expecting and knew that he was going to do. This warm-up took a lot longer than he anticipated, which made his math stations all shorter. We discussed how a warm-up needs to be very short and how to make it more meaningful. His assessment piece, he had shared with me before I did the observation that he was going to be assessing by just observations. We talked about how he would grade his observations and what things he could do where he could have something to actually look at, even though he was working with a small group, so he could check on what they were doing. He didn't realize he could go back and look at their Think Through Math, their computer station, and check the score and the progress they had made today during that class. I was very surprised today watching Mr. Moreau to see him trying some new strategies. When I have observed him in the past, he tends to move quite slowly, not really with a sense of urgency, and tends to kind of teach monotone. That's not what I saw at all today, and I was very excited to see the enthusiasm of Mr. Moreau. And in fact, he had rearranged his classroom so that he could stand up on top of the tables and walk the rows so he could check each of their work, which he did do, and the students loved it. How has this transformed my practice and what I will do different as an administrator? I would love to have the opportunity as an administrator to take teachers to see Ron Clark. It truly was a moving experience. We witnessed kids who were excited and teachers who were excited in a whole new way. I kind of think it was almost like a Disney World for teachers. I would love to have the opportunity to take teachers that are excited to go, and even maybe some reluctant teachers, and see how it can change them. It has completely changed the climate here at my school at Heather Glen, and we are starting a new house program. We will be starting that this Friday. The teachers have already drawn and we have been assigned to a house, and we are currently working on a chant or a cheer, and we're going to perform it for our elementary school on Friday. We have over 650 students here at this school. They will then get to select from a basket, and they'll be choosing a crayon, and the color of that crayon is going to determine what house they're in. I think this is really going to create more of a sense of family instead of my students in my class, but we have to work together as a team for our entire school. So in conclusion, I got to watch Mr. Moreau teach a math class, and during that class he did stations. It did work well. There were some things he needed to work on. The main changes that I would make were bringing problem solving and multiple steps into every day. The students have to know not only to divide, but when to divide. So I think that would take his lesson to a whole new step. His engagement and his